Hello, I'm Angela, and welcome to today's video and podcast on self nurturance. And in particular, this topic, self nurturance, I'm doing in response to crisis. So, how to stay healthy in crisis, how to deal with shock or grief and excess emotions. So, I was moved to do this topic because over the weekend I was watching a lot of YouTube, which is very insightful to find out about what's going on with our collective emotions and our collective consciousness or our feelings. And keep in mind that because of the pandemic, we have so many emotions collectively now. We're going through a collective experience, and that's creating a collective experience of emotions. So you might be feeling stressed because you're picking up a lot of those collective emotions. Some people are talking about sadness or other feelings. In particular, I was moved this morning by a video by Joe Rogan interviewing Dr. Peter Hotez, Hotez. So, Dr. Peter's a tropical disease doctor who's been working on vaccinations for lots of the previous coronaviruses. And he's working on one now for the current coronavirus. And he said he's getting emotional. So I thought that was wonderful to hear. Not that I'm happy he's emotional, but he said he's getting emotional, and I'm glad he shared that. He said he's a usually rational guy. However, he's getting emotional. He shared that he had sent doctors, his student doctors, on their internship after he taught them to New York. And now he's concerned about those students that he said New York's a great place to be. And he's thinking, I've sent those people into trouble. So he's experienced a whole range of emotions regarding that, regarding also wanting to get this vaccine ready. And he's trying to support people. He's getting emotional. So he's desperately looking to get this vaccine, moving forward funding for the vaccine, which isn't easy. So it brought me to realize that a lot of the emotions, there's many different emotions that we're going through collectively. And people on the front lines have different emotions. So thinking about another person I know who's a manager of a store where people are going to get their food supplies, and she has to be responsible for everybody enforcing social distancing and making sure that clients don't take out their aggression on her members of her staff. So a lot of us are experiencing situations that we didn't have to do before because of the virus, and also taking care. And it brought me to think about what emotions do when we're in crisis. And there are certain people who are home alone who are also dealing with mental health and not able to deal with the capacity in themselves to handle those emotions. So I will share an exercise, a very simple exercise today, to start channeling those emotions out of you. But the most important thing to understand from today's live stream and podcast is that our emotions, when there's too many emotions, are overwhelming. It's like a sea of emotions. Emotions are the water energy. When you have too many emotions, you're going to drown. And I know this personally from my own life experience. So I wanted to share an experience when I had my first experience of having to care for someone who was dying of cancer, my dad. And what happened to me at that time was I also got underactive thyroid, which I didn't know at the time. So I was getting sick with underactive thyroid as my dad was sick with cancer and also then became sicker and sicker and became terminal eventually with cancer. And I didn't know that that was going on. So I had this unconscious sickness happening. And if you know anything about underactive thyroid, you become moody, you become sick, in a lot of your sluggish in a lot of your behavior, your mentation slows down. So I was becoming emotional as well because I was struggling with how to actually function. And I knew I had to get up in the mornings to take dad to therapy. So I'd struggle even just thinking about, oh, I had to get out of bed to take dad to therapy. And I knew I had to do it. But the amount of sluggishness and heaviness of the emotion literally was stopping me from functioning to help dad and from functioning to help myself to get up and do things. So I had an extreme example with a physical disorder at that time, but it's not only the physical stuff, it's our emotions and getting into panic or getting into self defeating thoughts that can literally start to weigh down on you. So I literally felt this, like if you've ever had underactive thyroid, you feel like the world is slowing down and you're sluggishly trying to lift up the world. And some of you may actually experience emotions like that now. And I am suggesting or offering to you to become aware of that, that that is not just you. Like for me, I was unconscious that I had this thyroid disease. This feeling you might be feeling, or depression, can literally be feeling other people's sadness around you. You've seen videos of people globally uh, going out in the streets and dancing on their balconies because they're aware that if we come out collectively, we can shake off this energy. But in a similar fashion, negativity can be a collective energy. So, going back to my experience as being a carer, I wanted to give an example of what happened when dad was getting sicker and sicker. And I had to become more vigilant, and it was a struggle to become more vigilant because of the heaviness of my own negative energy and emotions. It, Dad one day looked at me, and because he was sicker, when people are sick as well, their eyes can become really penetrative because they can't move their bodies and they are able to actually communicate more clearly with the eyes. And Dad's eyes became really good at doing that. And I was having my own stuff because of my own negative energy. And Dad actually asked me for a hug. And in that moment, I was so like frazzled about what I thought was so important because I couldn't function. And I felt resistant to giving him a hug. I felt like, "Hmm, well, okay, I'll give you a hug." And I gave him a hug and then I walked away. And it's been one of the most profound things that happened to me while he was sick, out of several things. But that was incredible because I realized in that moment I was so wrapped up in my own suffering and even addicted to it that giving my dad a hug when I was already worried about him dying and worried about him suffering, giving him a hug felt like a burden. And in that moment, I walked away shocked that I was kind of unable to give affection. And it really struck me like, because I was negative, instead of actually doing something positive about my negative feelings, what did I do? I beat myself up. I said, "Oh, you're not a very good carer." And if you've ever been a carer, it's a very dangerous place to be because carers, especially if you're ongoing carers, you end up in a cycle of very negative habits and your energy gets depleted. So one of the things that we do a lot with carers is we try to offer them meditation or offer them stress relief or try to get them support in any fashion to get them some rejuvenation because you can get into negative cycles and get stuck in that sea of emotions or heavy energy. And a lot of it is just fear of losing someone you love or sadness at watching them pass, and it's quite devastating. So it's hard to deal with that when you're a carer, but a lot of us now collectively are struggling with that. So today I'm going to give you that simple exercise at the end of this stream to just show you how to release that energy. Because to be honest, what I realized with dad was if I was so stuck in my emotion I couldn't give someone a hug who I loved, then I basically was wasting my time suffering. And later on, I realized I was actually in these habits of staying in cycles and addiction to suffering, which all of us do, it's human to freak out. But when we get into a habit of it, and keep in mind that we're in this cycle of isolation for a few months now. So it's going to be like my thyroid disease pressing down on you until I got my medication sorted. I wasn't able to function. And it was quite a negative energy to carry around. Literally, my body was like, ugh, struggling and becoming fatter, thicker. Someone described me like a Sontarian from Doctor Who. If you've ever watched Doctor Who, the Sontarians, my body shape changed. I became an alien creature. That's how the emotions can impact us and the hormones can impact us when they're not able to cycle through the body effectively. And keep in mind also that a physical disease is the end result of what can be our spiritual conditions. So I had to learn through the underactive thyroid how heaviness and negativity can actually slow me down and stop me from using my ability to love or to use my emotions positively or to just be effective in my life, to be creative, to be positive to my own self, let alone positive to those around me. So, today for self nurturance, I would love to share. And if you have stories about self nurturance, how you've pulled yourself out of stuck situations, then please share those. My condition with the underactive thyroid, I had to understand that self negativity was not useful. That's why I had an extended period of sluggishness. This year, with my thyroid medication, I also had a revisit 20 years later to not feeling good because my medication went off from my cancer treatment. My thyroid went off. So I got to revisit what it was like to have underactive thyroid for about a month. And immediately I remembered that period from when I was sick initially when I looked after dad. And it was frightening. I was like, I don't want to go back there. So I can imagine for all of us who are experiencing heavy emotions, it's not pleasant. And when we see things on the media and we struggle, when we feel people suffering around us, when we hear about people perhaps even harming themselves or nurses and doctors suffering from caring for others, it can really deeply affect us. So I'm here to share that is not a way to effectively support others. As from my own example with dad, I realized not being able to hug him when that was all he really needed, when he was actually really suffering and in pain, he just wanted a hug. And he was so sweet the way he asked for it. So I couldn't go into my old programs around dad being, who's not a very touchy-feely person. In that moment, he was. He just wanted a hug, a little hug. Didn't have to be much. And it was so his eyes and his expression was so sweet and so in contrast to my grumpiness that it was such a beautiful memory to have of him being a softer person in that moment. And thanks, Dad, he's not here anymore. So you've left me some great memories to remember that softness, which I didn't witness from my dad during his life. But in that sickness, he was very affectionate. And he even joked with me when he was suffering. So it was wonderful to see how someone who was suffering could actually lift me up. He taught me a lot in my hospital experience last year how to be light. He was very chatty with people unless he was in extreme pain. And that's one of the strategies I used in my hospital experience. I talked to people. And when you're suffering, one of your tendencies is to go into shutdown and isolation. It can be a very easy trap, an addiction or a habit that you can get into. But just from my dad and from my own experience in hospital, I was on drugs, so that helped, but sometimes the drugs didn't work. And I would start making jokes or chatting to people or just get curious about someone else. And that immediately shifted my energy. So if we want to release these excess emotions, one of the simplest ways was, as I just shared, to just help somebody, reach out, connect, talk about your feelings to somebody who you know will empathize, and just generally accept that it's okay to feel not so great. And people will be there for you. Even with Dr. Peter, this today, when I heard him share that on his conference calls with people, he's been emotional. He was quite fine with that. And he's aware that that's a natural response. What's not so helpful, but perhaps, and it's not natural, is to be addicted to suffering behavior. It's not natural. Our nature is to move those energies out and to do something constructive. And in war times, we rise to the occasion. But unfortunately, because we're in isolation, some of us can sink in those emotions and get stuck and also addicted to behaviors of not using ourselves constructively. So, what can we do if we're feeling intense and excessive emotions? I wanted to share a perspective from a healer point of view. What I learned from Dad was me being a negative grumpy pants really wasn't helping me or Dad. And as a healer, I've also learnt that I am useless if I get sucked into the emotions of the collective. So, as a healer, what I've learnt is basically if I'm feeling off, emotional, I have to ask, am I picking up the collective? Yes. I get an intuitive response. Oh, that's good to know. That's not me. I'm picking up the collective. And from my learning with my own dad, I realized being grumpy or stressed or panicked, I'm not really going to be helpful to anyone, including myself. So as a healer, I've learned how to say, okay, I'm picking up the collective. What do I do with that? And I channel the energy out down my body or out through my sphere of energy, which I surround with love. And I transform that energy. And I do that all the time. Now, as a healer, sometimes my energy gets drained too, and I learn how to recharge my batteries. I like to dance, I like to laugh. Those are simple things I do. Cat video has been really good too, and cats. And there's lots of ways you can regenerate your energy. But after a while, even as a healer, you can pick up a lot of stuff. So it's like you've got sludge in your system. And I use healing strategies to just do a general clean out and just release that energy. I've shared in some of the other podcasts with Patty Oskfarek on building better relationships. A really simple one is when I have a shower, I just imagine that light energy pouring through the water. And water is a great remedy when you're having too much emotions. And I just literally wash my whole energy body and imagine the water's literally rinsing me clean. That might be a bit woo woo for some of you. And for others, you'll completely think, oh, I might try that. So use it however you wish. And you can just literally give yourself an energy wash that way. In chi, in dance, we also use our chi energy to literally breathe and breathe that energy out the body. And we use our hands as well. When we do a chi bath, we do it to ourselves or to others. You're literally wiping your chi with your breath down the sides of the body and out through the body. And my friend A Magi Melanie from A Magi Dance has got some dance videos as well, which are really good about your chi and using the chi energy to move that energy out and down your body. For others of you, it'll be more about your intent and awareness. You're not going to be so raptured about just having an energy bath. You'll be more addicted because your mind is addicted to this suffering piece. And look, I understand, like I was fully addicted to my suffering. I get it. Um, I just invite you to become aware of when that heavy energy gives you the illusion that somehow you can't do anything about it, or somehow you need to stay in the depression, or somehow you need to be in a suffering state. Suffering doesn't really help anyone, and it doesn't help you. So it's really quite indulgent. And in war times, we snapped out of, in the past war times. I mean, World War One and Two. These wars are different. The later wars are different. But we used to snap out of selfish or self-centered behaviour. We used to come into the collective good. But in isolation, what happens is we get stuck in the illusion that we're isolated. And you can begin, like I did when I saw Dad ask me for a hug, start to see how you're addicted to the suffering. Because really, I had to see it first. I didn't naturally warm to hug my dad. It wasn't like I did it because I knew he was right and he was tender, and I felt his request here in my heart, but I didn't do it naturally. I was still addicted to sort of being functional and doing the right thing, not really just letting my heart surrender to that moment. And not all of us are ready to let our heart surrender, so that's why we go into abrupt behaviors and cut people off. Now, um, if you're not a healer, there's many other talents that you have to get out of your behaviors. I have to ask the question if I'm picking up the collective, because that's my job, that's what I do. That may not be your solution, and you may find that because you've got habits before this pandemic that kept you in functional behavior, that you might keep trying to keep yourself busy. And that may be a good habit to keep you out of heavy emotions in this time. But sometimes the things you do to keep yourself busy, we can't do anymore because we have lockdown orders. Some of the things also that you do to keep yourself busy may actually need to stop. Like me with my dad, I need to stop trying to be perfect and do all the right things by my dad and just do the things that he needed in the moment. And that was difficult at the time because I was too emotional. So just be aware that busyness, what you do to be busy, is often an avoidance of sinking into the heart, and that's okay. As long as you don't cut yourself off and cut others off. Be aware that it's just a habit. We do that when we're in panic mode. But at some point, your emotions may come up and they might bite you in the, not just your rear end, but they might surprise you. So be aware that happens, and that's okay. Aim to get support though. Don't be isolated if you are struggling with heavy emotions. Reach out, try to find people who can make you smile and laugh and get a sense of being supported if you do break down. So let's look at this exercise for releasing excess emotion. A simple strategy as a healer that I've used for a long time now. I didn't have it at the time when I was looking after dad, and it would have helped me. Is just simply asking the bubble of energy around my body to be surrounded by love. So you can try that now as you're listening to this. You can close your eyes. You can imagine or ask or feel or sense a bubble of love around you. And that bubble can look in any manner or form, but it's literally like a soap bubble. And that's our aura. Keep in mind when we have emotions that they actually literally expand into a bubble of energy around us. So, with your eyes closed, you can just imagine that bubble of love around you. And anything that's coming into your aura or bubble is transformed into love. And anything that leaves your bubble is transformed into love. So some of you may know that I use the blue flame to surround my bubble, and it's an ancient spiritual tool. The blue flame to surround your bubble has that intent that it transforms anything that comes into your aura into love, and anything that leaves your aura into love. And it starts to give you a sense of protection and healing. The blue flame is specifically about healing. But that protection, or the sealing of that bubble around you, and you can open your eyes now if you've got them closed, that bubble around you, it literally is just reminding you that you have ability to seal your energy and to stabilize the emotions. You might still be picking up, but the emotions that are coming in through that bubble of love are going to be transformed into something more loving, something that you'll be able to eventually understand. Love isn't always about feeling good, and that may be an illusion that you have. Especially with my dad, one of my illusions was that I somehow, when I hugged him, I had to be loving. I had to feel like I was a good girl, or I had to feel that I was doing a good job and that I was good enough as a carer. And I had to see those illusions I had about being perfect or not good enough. So that was important. And I began to see that after Dad passed, all of those illusions I had about being somehow a perfect carer or not enough as a carer. I did what I did. And yes, maybe in that moment I wasn't allowing Dad's affection to come into me, but I wasn't able to at that time. I was still dealing with my illusions about myself. So once you put the bubble of love around you, you can start to ask with that intent to be surrounded by love for energies that or emotions that come into you to start to be understood. Love is actually about understanding so that we can accept good and bad things in our lives. Love is not about feeling bliss all the time in our relationships. Unconditional love is, but we're humans. And we came with conditions to understand what those conditions are, or our perceptions of love are, so that we could learn to go beyond those filters about what love is. Unconditional love is what universal love is about. And we're not able to do that on a daily level, especially our emotions are kind of really the lowest form of love. And we're working up to understanding those emotions so we can learn to be able to increase our ability to become unconditional in love, which is our divine forms of love or universal love. And now we can just step into the second piece. Once you've got your bubble of love around you, you can ask for anything in that bubble, by the way. If you just want to ask to be treated with more tenderness, like my dad was asking when he wanted a hug, that's a great thing. So, going back to closing your eyes, the next thing I can offer today when dealing with too much emotion is to place a hand on your heart center. Now, you can use prayer hands if you like. I prefer one hand on my heart center, and it just starts to help me breathe. In the center of your palm, there's a lovely energy center. And naturally, we have those energy centers in our palms to help us to gently nurture when we hold a child, when we hug. Our hands are also sending that energy to support and nurture. So, the hand on your heart center with your eyes closed and some gentle breathing now inside that bubble of love can just start you to accept what's going on inside you, whatever's going on. We don't know what's going on inside of us most of the time until we start to connect. And then the third piece, after you have your bubble of love, and your hand on your heart center and your breathing. The third piece is simply to ask any excess emotions be released from you now. Just try it if you want as you're listening to me now. You can ask any excess emotions to be released from you now. And you can do that in so many ways. I'm going to give you two. You can just use your breath to release any excess emotions down your body, through the legs and through the feet, down into the earth, into Mother Earth, or into the grid system if you use the grid system. And with your breath, just breathe them down. The most powerful thing is your intent to release any excess emotions. Once you have that intent and you just really focus on your so intent to release those excess emotions now, I can guarantee you that they are released. I used this in hospital several times when I was quite ill and not able to even mentally function, but I just used my breath to release the excess emotions, and things magically started to function around me, even though my brain wasn't. And again, the second way to release with your breath is just to imagine that that energy is being released through your bubble to the universe. So it's just through your breath as you breathe it out of your bubble in any direction, out of your aura, like it's expanding out of your aura that's surrounded in love and being taken by the divine or the universal energy and transformed into love. Some of you may have a connection to the divine, some of you may not. It doesn't really matter, it's your intent to release it to the universe, to transform that energy. Our imagination is so powerful. And in this time of crisis, we are being offered an opportunity not to go to a physical war, but to go to an opportunity to use our imagination, our intent to be kind, to use it to come together, to rise above the crisis. And that's an amazing opportunity if you think about the previous world wars. We've got a time to come together to release excess emotions that really don't help us so we can come together. And if you're isolated, then you can also use this exercise to release and transform those energies to come together with others who are doing the same. So if you have your eyes closed, you can open them and play with keeping the hand on your heart center and just noticing if the touch of your hand is helping you to feel somewhat better. When my dad asked for his hug, he was looking for that touch. And often we need touch when we're deprived of physical contact to just bring the body back to a sense of uh, release or connection or safety, comfort, self nurturance. And my self touch has been often around my heart center to just really connect me back to who I really am. I'm not the emotions, I'm so much more. And also, a similar call to rise above our emotions has been called by different people all over the planet right now. So I wanted to just share that the Indian Prime Minister today in India at 9 o'clock Indian time is asking all people in India to come out and wave a light collectively to remind them of their collective unity. We often think in isolation and getting sucked into habitual cycles of negative habits of emotion, that this thing about light and coming together, meh. But here is a whole country now, or an invitation from a leader to come out and focus on the spirit of the country and how they can come together in spite of very strong differences of culture, ethnicity, and religion in that country. So 9 p.m. Indian time, it's like 3 o'clock in the morning, Australia the next day. So I'll be sleeping and waving my light. And it's a reminder to us globally that our ability to go beyond our emotions is a very important opportunity in this time. Thank you for listening or joining today. And I look forward to more of your stories about rising above your emotions, not pushing them away, rising above. And I welcome you to enjoy some of your own heart by your self touch as well. Thank you.